One more time, just for comparison, this is what I started with, and this is what it turned into. Hey, what's going on? I'm Jamie Blake, and in this video, I'm gonna break down how I made the track that you heard using a single room tone recording that I took with this microphone and processed with a bunch of Polyverse plugins. First, let's take a listen to the source material. It's just a recording of the room that I'm sitting in right now. All right, so basically just sounds like noise. Now I'm gonna solo the drums and break down how I made each of the drum layers. So for each of these tracks, I just copied the room recording down to a new audio track and then started processing it. So on the kick track, I pitched the sample down as far as it would go, consolidated it, and then transposed it down as far as it would go again. So it sounds like this. Let me turn off Gatekeeper. Yeah, so it's just a really low version of the room tone. And then I use Gatekeeper to just generate a little pattern, just a short transient that I could turn into a kick. So I printed that down, and then I took one little instance of that hit and put it on a new track. And then I used a drum bus, which is just a combination of some saturation, compression, and a resonant EQ bump down in the sub frequencies. Kick sounds like this. So below that, I have this track called Kick SC. Instead of sending the MIDI from this kick sidechain track to one instance of Gatekeeper right here, I just made an instrument rack with a bunch of external instruments so that I could route this same MIDI clip that's copying what the kick is doing to a bunch of instances of Gatekeeper. All right, so then I got these two rim tracks right here. So on this high one, it's just kind of a bandpass EQ. So this rim high track sounds like this. And it's just a simple pattern right on beat 3 that I have going on inside of Gatekeeper. So without Gatekeeper, it sounds like this. It's kind of whistly and harsh. All right, and then down here on the rim low track, same thing going on. Same pattern with Gatekeeper, just on beat 3. Except for this one, I'm doing a bandpass a little bit lower. So when you combine the two, it ends up sounding like this. All right, and then I've got this snare track right here. And on the snare track, I have Gatekeeper. It's the same thing on beat 3 as both of the rim tracks. Then I have some offbeat hits, and I have the value set a little bit quieter, so it kind of sounds like, not quite ghost notes, but they're just like a lower velocity, like as if you're hitting a snare drum softer. All right, and then after Gatekeeper, just some light EQ and a little bit of compression. So when I combine this snare with the two rim tracks, it sounds like this. All right, then I have this percussion track right here. And on the percussion track, I have 3 different envelopes inside of Gatekeeper. So I have this one, and this one. And then although they all look the same, the time values are all a bit different. And I also have the second and third ones hard pan left and right. All right, so let's take a listen to just the percussion. And I'm just rolling off some bass frequencies over here. This instance of Gatekeeper is just a side chain from the kick. So every time the kick hits, it just ducks this track a little bit. All right, and then I got this hi-hat track. And on here, I've got Gatekeeper. It's just playing quarter notes. And I have all these values delayed just a little bit, so it's not too clicky of a hi-hat. It's more of a soft hi-hat, like if you hit it with the edge of the stick versus the tip of the stick. Then a little bit of EQ to cut out the low end, a little compression. And then I have an LFO on a filter just so it's not super stagnant. This instance of Gatekeeper, again, is just a side chain from the kick, and then cut out the low end. Okay, and last but not least, I have the open hi-hat sound. On the open hi-hat, I just have a lot of low end and mid frequencies rolled off. And then inside Gatekeeper, I just have this funky little envelope that will swell this noise right into the snare sample. So let's take a listen to that. Okay, again, each one of these tracks is the same room tone recording. They're just all processed a little bit different. So one more time, let's listen to the drums all together. And that reverb that you're hearing is just on a return track right here. So I have one instance of Comet. It's got a relatively big size and a bit of decay on it. And then I just rolled off some lows and highs on the reverb. Okay, let's move on to the chords. So for the chords, let's solo that up for a sec. All right, so I have a MIDI track called Chords MIDI, and I'm routing that MIDI information to this audio track named Chords, and you can see it's going into an instance of I Wish. So let me turn off the plugins again just to show you. This is just the room tone. So I took a little loop, just a shorter cycle of the room tone, and then ran these chords into I Wish right here. And then from there, it's going into this filter. Without the filter, it's just really bright, so I'll show you what that sounds like real quick. And then with the filter, and I got this EQ just cutting out some bass frequencies. And this instance of Gatekeeper, again, is just a side chain from the kick and being sent to the reverb just a little bit. Okay, so inside I Wish, I just took the pitch and the formant up an octave. I have a little bit of vibrato going on here, and I have a pretty high value on the crossfade. The attack is set to 159 milliseconds. The release is set to 852 milliseconds. And the fade in on this LFO is a little over 4 seconds, 4,259 milliseconds. And yeah, the end product sounds like this. All right, let's move on to the bass. Now this one was pretty tricky, I'm not gonna lie. So same kind of deal with a separate MIDI track, only this time I'm using Manipulator. So I have the MIDI from this track being routed into an audio track named Bass that has Manipulator on it. So let's go take a look at that. And I'm gonna solo the bass just for a second. This Gatekeeper is just a sidechain from the kick. This is a utility, just cutting the volume. And this is just a post EQ after Manipulator, and then there's Manipulator. So let me turn off the EQ and Manipulator, and I'll show you how I just did a bandpass filter, some low resonance within the room tone sample. So I'll turn off the EQ and Manipulator and hit play. If I turn off this utility, it's just cutting the volume in a couple spots, so it's not playing the entire time. All right. Okay, so I got a resonant bump going on and some sub frequencies, and then I'll turn on Manipulator, show you what I have going on here. So I took the pitch up an octave, the formants up an octave, and then I took the harmonics down by 1 and had a ratio of 0.5, and then I added a little bit of frequency modulation and a little bit of smear. So let's take a listen to what this sounds like with Manipulator. As you can hear, it's pretty growly. You know, it's got a lot of harmonics in it. So I just rolled some of those back out and just kept some little bit of the harmonics. So it sounds like this. So that's how I did the bass. Okay, moving on to the leads. First, I have this lead track right here, which has MIDI information being fed to it from this lead MIDI track. It's got a simple little melody on it, and it's going into this audio track named lead into this instance of I Wish. So I'm gonna solo this up here for a sec, and you can take a listen to just the lead by itself. Okay, so this track has a little bit more going on with it. And again, bypass all the plugins. You can see this is just the sample of the room tone. So let me turn the plugins back on. Okay, so first of all, I have I Wish going on here. The pitch and the formant are both down 12 semitones, crossfades at about 77%, relatively quick attack, 9 milliseconds. The release time is 527, and yes, nothing too complicated, a little bit of glide going on, and I have the polyphony set to mono. So after I Wish is where more of the magic happens with this particular instrument. So I have an instance of Comet here, and this instance of Comet, I have the sidechain input being fed from this Gatekeeper CV track. So right above this lead track, I have this other track called Gatekeeper CV. It's just blank, there's nothing on it. There's just one instance of Gatekeeper, and it's got 2 envelopes. And I have the CV output enabled. So if you right click on one of these nodes, you can go to CV output. And that is what is feeding this instance of Comet over here on my lead track. So if I open up the settings inside of Comet, you could see that the CV in right is affecting the pre-delay, CV in left is affecting the detune, and CV in left is also affecting the size. So get out of the settings there. And if I put Comet at 100% dry, I just want to show you what this sounds like without Comet and then with Comet, because this is having a pretty drastic effect on the sound. And then I'll put Comet back at 100% wet. Okay, I got this utility here, just cutting the volume in a couple spots. And then I have another instance of Comet that's just to have a bunch of decay, just so it rings out, sounds nice and full. And then I have this instance of Gatekeeper at the end, and this is what's giving it the swell. So let me turn off this instance of Gatekeeper, and I'll also turn off this other instance of Comet right here so you can take a listen to what it sounds like. And I'll turn these back on. So it almost gives it kind of a reverse feel. It's got some swell to it, a little bit of suction. I really like the sound, so kind of stuck with it. And then I have just a little bit of automation going on with the reverb, right? And then lastly, I have an ARP track. So for this ARP track, I have the same notes from the chords from earlier, from up here. And I have the MIDI from this being routed to the audio track named ARP, and it's going into I Wish. So let me bypass all these on the ARP track, and again, you could listen to the room tone before it's being processed. First, let's talk about the I Wish settings. So I have the pitch and the formant both up 12 semitones, the cross values at 79%, and the attack is at 83 milliseconds, release is at 75 milliseconds. And then the arpeggiator on this MIDI track, the rate is set to 1/48, and the steps are at 2, and the style is up and down. So when I arpeggiate the notes in the chords, send that to I Wish on this ARP track, it sounds like this. And I just have the filter on there so it kind of plays nice in the mix. When the filter's off, it's just kind of bright sounding. It doesn't sound bad, but when it's in the mix, it definitely gets a little bit harsh. So let's listen to the ARP and the lead together. Okay, so let's take a listen to everything together and see how they all mesh. One more time, just for comparison, this is what I started with, and this is what it turned into. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video inspiring. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like, leave a comment, let me know what your favorite part was or what kind of videos you want to see in the future. And I encourage you to go out and challenge yourself and do something like this and take a single recording of something and just see how many ways you can stretch and squeeze and mold it into something musical. All right, thanks again for watching. Until next time.